At the oyster bar, my girlfriend said, "My friends are honestly embarrassed for me when I bring you around." I paid my half of the bill, walked down, and never spoke to her again. Now her friends watch me thrive while she goes from disaster to disaster. My name's Fred Wright and I'm 31 years old. The whole thing ended where it had tried so hard to begin. At Harbor and Vine, Greatport's only restaurant with cloth napkins and tiny forks. It was the kind of place Brooke Adams, my girlfriend of 3 years, dreamed of belonging to. For me, it was just a place with an overpriced lobster roll. She'd been pushing her oysters around the plate for 10 minutes, the ice melting beneath them, before she finally spoke. She didn't look at me. She was staring at her own distorted reflection in the back of a spoon. "My friends," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kelsey and Bryn, they just don't get you, Fred. It's embarrassing for me." Kelsey Morgan and Bryn Carter, her two best friends, were a matched set of status-obsessed social climbers who judged a person's worth by the brand of their shoes. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the clink of silverware from other tables. I thought about the double shifts I'd pulled at the fire station to help her pay for that online influencer course. I thought about the countless times I'd driven her an hour out of town at 11 at night for some networking event that was really just a crowded bar, then waited in the truck until she was ready to leave. Then she brought his name into it like she was introducing a new exciting character into a boring old story. Logan Pierce, a marina investor, was polished and ambitious. He leased a new electric car every 2 years and talked about synergy. "He understands the importance of image," she said, finally looking up at me, her eyes clear and decided. "I'm moving on." There was no room for discussion in her tone. It was a statement of fact, like reporting the weather. I didn't argue. I didn't yell or plead or list all the things I'd done for her. What was the point? You can't negotiate desire. I just reached for my wallet, the worn leather cool against my palm. I pulled out enough cash to cover my half of the bill and added a generous tip for our waiter, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. I stood up from the table, my chair making a soft scraping sound on the polished wood floor. I gave her a single final nod. "I hear you," I said. Then I turned and walked out into the cool, foggy night without looking back, leaving her there with her half-eaten oysters and her shiny big city dreams. The first week was defined by a profound silence. I blocked her number and her social media accounts without ceremony. I took down the 2 framed pictures of us that sat on my mantelpiece, leaving pale rectangles on the wall. The silence in my small apartment was deafening, so I decided to drown it out with the sounds of my jaw. I picked up every overtime shift I could get at Greatport Fire Rescue, trading the quiet hum of my refrigerator for the controlled chaos of sirens and service. The exhaustion was a welcome blanket. My supervisor, Fire Captain Mark Dalton, a man who'd known me since I was a rookie, pulled me aside after a long shift. He had a kind but no-nonsense look on his face. He didn't ask about Brooke. He wasn't the type to pry. He just looked me in the eye and said, "Don't burn yourself outright. We need you sharp." His words cut through the fog of my self-pity. He was right. People depended on me to be at my best. During one of those long, quiet nights at the station, I found myself thinking about my dad, Daniel Wright. He was a fisherman, part of the lifeblood of this town. He died on a trawler a decade ago, a preventable mishap involving a faulty winch and the lack of a proper first aid kit on board. The official report used that exact phrase, preventable mishap. It had haunted me for years. It was a cold, clinical way of saying someone's carelessness had cost my father his life. Lying there on my bunk, it hit me that I wasn't just angry with Brooke for thinking I wasn't enough. I was angry at the world for being full of preventable mishaps, for all the little corners cut that lead to big tragedies. I took the money I had been carefully saving for an engagement ring and decided to build something instead of buying something. I called it DocWatch. The idea was simple: a free weekend program for local teens, teaching them basic first aid, water rescue, and emergency preparedness, all right there on the docks where they spent their summers. The first session was small, just 6 kids, most of them a little shy and awkward. We used a couple of old CPR dummies from the station, and I showed them how to tie a tourniquet using a t-shirt and a stick. A few weeks in, Nora Bennett, a retired Coast Guard rescue swimmer with eyes that had seen everything the sea could throw at a person, saw my flyer at the post office. She showed up one Saturday morning, arms crossed, and watched for a solid hour before walking over and telling me my technique for a throw rope rescue was sloppy. She became my lead volunteer, and she was more organized and tougher than any 2 people I knew. Together, we taught kids how to spot the signs of hypothermia, how to properly splint a broken limb, and how to stay calm when someone else is panicking. While Brooke's social media feed filled up with filtered photos of cocktails at the yacht club, mine filled up with pictures of teenagers confidently applying pressure to a fake wound. I even took the plunge and bought a small, fixer-upper bungalow near the bluff. It needed a new roof and the plumbing was a mess, but it had a yard big enough for DocWatch potlucks and a view of the water that was all mine. It was the first thing in a long time that felt completely unshakably mine. The call came in around 10 on a Friday night, a minor kitchen fire at the new members-only lounge Logan had opened at the marina. It was called the Anchor Club, a name that felt both pretentious and unoriginal. When my unit arrived, the fire was already out. A cook had gotten a little too excited with a flaming dessert, and the sprinkler system had done its job, leaving behind a lot of smoke and the smell of burnt sugar. Logan was there, of course, looking impossibly smooth in a tailored blazer, calming his wealthy patrons by calling it away, and standing right next to him looking flustered but trying to play the part of the gracious hostess was Brooke. She saw me as I walked in with my gear and her face went completely pale. For a second, the mask of sophistication she wore slipped, and I saw the girl I used to know. She tried to offer me a small, familiar smile, a ghost of an old intimacy. I just gave her a professional nod and got to work. My partner went to check on the kitchen staff, making sure no one had inhaled too much smoke. Standard procedure dictated that I do a quick safety sweep of the immediate area to make sure there were no other hazards. That's when I started to see things. The first was a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near the bar. I glanced at the inspection tag. It was 2 years out of date, then I saw the primary emergency exit. It was a big double door with a push bar, but it was partially blocked by a stack of liquor boxes, easily 3 feet high, a clear violation. I continued my sweep, my senses on high alert. Something felt off about the whole place. Behind the bar there was an emergency radio, a vital piece of equipment for a waterfront establishment. I picked up the handset and pressed the button, nothing. It wasn't just unplugged. I opened the back and saw that the battery was completely corroded, a crust of greenish-white powder covering the terminals. It probably hadn't worked in years. I walked over to one of the young waiters who was nervously wiping down a clean table. "Hey, where's the master first aid kit?" I asked him. He just shrugged, his eyes wide. "I think Mr. Pierce said it was on order." Logan must have seen me making notes on my small pad because he came gliding over, that politician's smile plastered on his face. "Everything's fine, fellas, big misunderstanding." "No need to linger," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder in a way that was meant to be friendly but felt like a dismissal. I instinctively stepped away. He was a man trained only in smiles and handshakes, not in safety protocols. Every corner that could be cut to save a buck he had clearly cut. This wasn't just sloppy management, it was a deliberate pattern of negligence. It was the exact same kind of thinking, the same "it'll probably be fine" attitude that led to preventable mishaps. The kind that had gotten my father killed. Before I left, I wrote down every single violation in my preliminary incident log. It wasn't my official report yet, but it was a start. It was a record of the truth. A few days later, I was down at the docks replacing some frayed ropes we used for the dock watch rescue drills. The sun was out, a rare treat in Greyport, and the water was sparkling. That's when one of my dad's old friends, a fisherman named Sal, shuffled over to me. He was a man whose hands were permanently stained with grease and salt, and his face was a road map of a life lived outdoors. He'd heard about the fire at Logan's Lounge and asked me in a low voice if that new investor guy seemed on the level. Before I could answer, he told me why he was asking. Logan had been walking the piers for weeks, selling a dream. He was collecting what he called founder deposits for a massive new marina expansion project. For a one-time fee, boat owners were promised a prime state-of-the-art slip in the new development. Sal, like many others, had bought into it. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a slick, glossy flyer showing a computer-generated image of a beautiful, modern marina. He also showed me a carbon copy of a receipt for a $5,000 deposit he'd paid directly to Logan's company. The problem, Sal said, was that there was no approved expansion project. The plans hadn't even been submitted to the town council for review. There were no permits, no blueprints, nothing. Logan was selling air. And Sal said dozens of others had paid, too. Hardworking fishermen, retirees who lived on their boats, young families who'd saved up for years. Logan had collected a fortune, well over $100,000, with nothing to show for it but a pretty picture and a pile of broken promises. The safety violations at the lounge were one thing, that was dangerous negligence, but this was something else entirely. This was a calculated, predatory scam. Logan wasn't just cutting corners on safety. He was actively stealing from the people of Greyport, from the very heart of the community. He was exploiting their trust and their hope for a better future for the town. Suddenly, this whole situation felt so much bigger than my own personal history with Brooke. This wasn't about a breakup anymore. It was about my duty as an EMT. My promise to protect the people in this town. I couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. My dad, who believed in a firm handshake and a person's word, would have never let something like this slide. In that moment, standing on the creaking wooden planks of the pier, I made a choice. I wasn't going to storm into Logan's lounge and confront him. I wasn't gonna call Brooke and try to warn her. That would just create drama and give him a chance to cover his tracks. No, I was gonna do this my way, quietly, methodically. I was gonna gather every single fact, every piece of evidence I could find, and I was gonna hand it all to someone who could use the truth to burn his entire fraudulent operation to the ground. My goal wasn't just to get over my past anymore. It was to make sure my town had a future. In the weeks that followed, Brooke's social media became a public relations campaign for Logan's fraud. It was a non-stop showcase of their perfect life, all funded by the stolen deposits of my neighbors. She posted glossy photos of herself at a series of lavish sponsored dinners at Harbor and Vine, raising a glass of champagne to Logan, the visionary. Her captions were a nauseating salad of corporate buzzwords, building the future of Greyport one dream at a time. She'd write, "So proud to be on this journey with this visionary leader." In every other photo, Kelsey and Bryn were right there, flanking her, their smiles wide as they praised Logan's brilliance and disruptive thinking. They were all in on it, enjoying the spoils of a crime they didn't want to see. Then came the post that felt like a punch to the gut. It was a picture of her and Logan on the deck of a sleek, expensive-looking boat, the sun setting behind them. She was laughing, her head thrown back, the picture of carefree happiness. The caption reads, "Some people are content to stay in one place, others are meant to sail away." It was so obviously a shot at me, at my decision to build a life here in the town where I was born. It stung, I won't lie. But more than that, it made things crystal clear. She wasn't a clueless victim who had been swept up in Logan's scam. She was a willing participant, a co-signer on his fantasy. She was selling the lie right alongside him because she loved the way it looked. I started taking screenshots. Every post, every caption, every tagged photo of them spending money that wasn't theirs. It felt gross, like I was some kind of private investigator spying on a person I once loved, but I knew it was necessary. The public nature of their scam was their biggest weakness, and I intended to use it. Word must have gotten around that I was asking some quiet questions because people started to seek me out. It wasn't a flood, just a trickle at first. A retired school teacher approached me after a doc watch session, her hands trembling slightly as she showed me the screenshot on her phone of her $8,000 payment to Logan's company. She also had the confirmation email, a cheerful, automated message promising her new slip would be ready by summer. The owner of the local bait and tackle shop, a gruff man named Gary, handed me a thick stack of the glossy promotional flyers Logan had left on his counter. "Never trusted a man with shoes that shiny," he grumbled. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture that was uglier than I had imagined. Nora Bennett, my sharpest attack dock watch volunteer, used her old Coast Guard connections to do a little digging of her own. She discovered that Logan's company, Greyport Marina Development LLC, was nothing more than a shell company registered to a post office box in a state 300 miles away. It had no assets, no history, no substance. It was a ghost. I now had a folder at home that contained my detailed fire incident notes from the lounge, copies of more than a dozen payment receipts from worried locals, the misleading promotional materials promising facilities that didn't exist, and a collection of screenshots showing Brooke and Logan living it up on the community's dime. The full picture was undeniable. A professional con artist was preying on a small, trusting town, and his girlfriend was his head of marketing. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that told me I had to act now, came when the agenda for the next town council meeting was posted outside the post office. There was item number 4, a request from Logan Pierce for his temporary operating permit for the Anchor Club to be made permanent. He was going to use the town's own authority, its own seal of approval, to legitimize his entire scam. The ticking clock was now deafening. I knew I couldn't be the one to stand up at that meeting. It would immediately be dismissed as a personal vendetta. The bitter ex-boyfriend trying to ruin his replacement's life. They wouldn't see the evidence. They would only see me. That's when I thought of Rita Chin, a local reporter for the Great Port Gazette. She wasn't a high-powered journalist from the city. She was quiet, wore sensible shoes, and showed up to every single boring town planning meeting. She reported on zoning laws and municipal permits with the same seriousness she'd give a 5-alarm fire. She dealt in facts. I went home, put everything I had, the incident notes, copies of every receipt, the flyers, the damning screenshots, into a single thick manila envelope. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding a little. I introduced myself and got straight to the point. "I have a story about the new marina development," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "It's a public safety issue and a financial one. Can we meet?" The night before the town council hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every creak of my old house sounding like a footstep. Rita had met with me, taken my file, and listened intently, her expression unreadable. She had promised she'd look into it, and that if the story held up, her article would be in the morning paper just hours before the meeting, but I hadn't heard a single word from her since. A sickening wave of doubt washed over me. What if I had it all wrong? What if Logan had some perfectly reasonable explanation for the shell company, the unfiled plans, the out-of-date safety equipment? Maybe the deposits were just standard practice. I would be exposed as a jealous fool. A small-town guy consumed by bitterness. Brooke's words from that night at the oyster bar would suddenly ring true for the whole town to hear. I wasn't just embarrassing to her. I was a pathetic man who couldn't handle being left behind. I felt completely and utterly alone. I hadn't told Mark Dalton the full extent of what I was doing, not even Nora. This was my risk, and if it blew up, I'd be the only one burned. For a fleeting moment, I actually considered calling Rita's cell phone and telling her to kill the story. Just let it go. Let Logan get his permit. It wouldn't be my problem anymore. But then I pictured Sal the fisherman's face. The way his hopeful eyes had looked when he showed me his receipt, I thought of my dad and that cold official phrase, preventable mishap. My only choice was to hold on and trust that the truth presented clearly and without emotion was enough. It was a fragile hope to cling to in the dark. The old cannery which served as Greyport's town hall was packed for the hearing. Every seat was taken and people were standing along the back wall. I found a spot in the back corner, just another face in the crowd, my stomach twisting into knots. Logan was at the front podium, oozing charisma as he charmed the council members with talk of growth and prosperity. In the front row, Brooke sat beaming at him, looking every bit the proud partner. Kelsey and Bren were on either side of her, a loyal court of admirers. Just as Logan wrapped up his slick presentation, Mayor Grace Holloway, a woman who didn't suffer fools, announced they would begin with a brief procedural review. She held up a copy of that morning's Greyport Gazette. There on the front page was Rita's article. The headline was big and bold. Investor under fire for safety lapses, unbuilt marina slips. A low murmur rippled to the crowd. I saw Logan's practiced smile freeze on his face. Brooke's expression faltered. Mayor Holloway, without missing a beat, then called Fire Captain Mark Dalton to the podium to speak on the public safety record of the applicant's current establishment. Mark walked to the front, his face impassive. He wasn't there as my friend, he was there as a public servant. He opened a folder and began to read from my official incident report from the lounge fire. He read every detail in a calm, factual monotone that was more damning than any angry accusation could ever be: the expired extinguisher, the blocked emergency exit, the corroded, non-functional radio, the lack of a first aid kit. As Mark finished and stepped away from the podium, a voice from the audience cut through the stunned silence. It was Sal. He was on his feet, his worn flannel shirt a stark contrast to Logan's suit. He took $5,000 from me for a slip that doesn't exist. He boomed, his voice shaking with anger. That one act of courage broke the dam. The retired teacher stood up, waving her printed receipt. $8,000 from me. Then another person stood, and another. Within a minute, a dozen people were on their feet, their voices joining a chorus of accusation, waving their receipts in flyers like flags of protest. Logan tried to speak, stammering about misunderstandings and unexpected project timelines, but his polish was gone. He looked like what he was, a cornered animal. Brooke's face was a mask of pure horror. She stared at Logan as if seeing him for the first time, then her terrified eyes scanned the crowd and locked on to mine. There wasn't any anger in her gaze, just a dawning, desperate shock of realization. The council didn't even need to deliberate. The vote was unanimous. Logan's temporary permit was suspended, and a full investigation would be launched pending the full refund of all deposits. Logan didn't wait for the meeting to be formally adjourned. He snatched his leather briefcase from the table and practically ran out of the cannery, leaving Brooke sitting all alone in the front row, the center of everyone's attention. A week later, the annual Greyport Warfest was in full swing. The air was filled with the sounds of a local band playing slightly off-key sea shanties and the happy shouts of kids. Our dock watch tent was buzzing with activity. We were doing free CPR demonstrations on one of the dummies, and Nora was patiently showing a group of teenagers how to tie a bowline knot. There was a line of parents waiting to sign their kids up for the next session. The story of Logan's spectacular implosion had spread through town like wildfire. He'd apparently vanished the night of the hearing, leaving Brooke with an unpaid credit card bill for over $14,000 from all those sponsor dinners. Partway through the afternoon, Mayor Holloway got up on the main stage. She gave a short speech about community and resilience. Then she gave a simple thank you to the citizens who had spoken up at the hearing. And then she mentioned me by name, praising the Dock Watch program as a shining example of what makes Greyport special. The crowd applauded, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. It was humbling and deeply gratifying. Later, as the crowd started to thin, Brooke found me by the tent. She looked exhausted. The expensive designer dress she was wearing seemed out of place among the practical jeans and fishing boots of everyone else. She told me she was sorry that she'd made a huge mistake. She said she missed the stability I gave for the very things she used to mock as a lack of ambition. Then she asked for another chance. I looked at her. Then, over at the group of teenagers who were now laughing as Nora quizzed them on first aid. I felt a profound sense of peace. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just a quiet certainty. Thank you for the clarity you gave me at the oyster bar, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I found the life I want right here. I declined her offer to reconnect, and I could see the last bit of hope drained from her face. A few yards away, Kelsey and Bryn were watching us, their expressions unreadable. They didn't come over to comfort her. Brooke just stood there for a moment, an island in the middle of the festival, before she finally turned and drifted away into the crowd completely on her own. Sometimes the best revenge is building a life they can't touch. If you've ever had to walk away to find your worth, share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories like this.